So my boyfriend and I, moved to this place about 3 years ago. When one day, not long after, I was parking in the street directly in front of the building and our unit, and I heard a guy in his car say something along the lines of, "Bitch, get out of my parking spot." I later came to realize that this was my neighbor, who lives with his parents next door. I brushed it off. Then one night I was sitting watching TV in my living room, when I saw out of the corner of my eye a light, which turned out to be a flame from a lighter. That same neighbor was using it to light his pipe or joint, or whatever it was, and I know it must have been that, because he was constantly smoking pot on his patio. Anyway, his car was parked in front of my living room windows, and he was leaning on it, staring directly into my home. I closed the curtains, texted my boyfriend, and began to feel a little uncomfortable. Not long after that, it had turned nighttime, and I was doing the laundry in the building, when I noticed that a pair of my underwear was missing. Perplexed, I chose not to dwell on it. That is until the next laundry load, when I had 2 more missing. Now, I know I didn't drop them, as I am always very careful with them. So who the heck wants to put on underwear that's been on the dirty ground? At that point, I put 2 and 2 together that it was him. I had also heard a quick tap on my bathroom window, as I was showering at night one time. My boyfriend works nights, so I know the neighbor knew I was home alone, and was the one in the shower. Needless to say, this guy really did a number on my psychological state. I now hate going outside, and he ruined my sense of safety in my own home. I ended up taping a note onto the wall in the laundry room about it being punishable by law to steal underwear and to stop doing it because we see you. After that, he backed off. Another time when I was in my car, and he was parked in front of me, he looked at me as I gave him the "do not mess with me, I'm backcrap crazy" look, and he hasn't messed with me since. If he ever did anything else, I would lose it. I know it's not a good idea, but I've been angry and depressed and bitter and anxious for far too long to deal with any more of his crap. Anyway, I wanted to share this, because I'd like to know who else has had creepy neighbors they've dealt with. I've been meaning to make a police report, but he stopped harassing me, so I just never got around to it. I feel that maybe the fact he lives with his parents might have helped too. Who knows what else someone who steals chonies is capable of doing? Very unsettling.
So I'm a 21-year-old male, and this experience happened last summer while I was on vacation at Myrtle Beach with my family. We were staying in a resort right on the beach, and we're on the 13th or 14th floor in a sort of timeshare. One night I was feeling restless and having a hard time falling asleep, and at around 3 a.m., I decided to go out on the balcony to get some air. I stepped out and was stunned as there was a full moon, and the moonlight on the water was really beautiful. The beach was completely empty as far as I could see, and I had never seen it like that before. I decided that since I wasn't able to sleep, I might as well head down, take a stroll, and listen to some music to relax. Hopefully when I return, I'd be able to get some sleep. It was really unsafe and dumb of me, but since it was 3 a.m. and the rest of my family was asleep, I decided to just head down without letting any of them know I was going, as I thought I would just go and chill there for about 10 to 15 minutes, then come right back up. So at the base of the timeshare we were at, there was an area with a pool, an outdoor bar, and then 2 boardwalks separated by about 100 feet, which both led to the beach. On the sides of the boardwalks, there were swaths of tall grass separating the ocean and the resort. When I got down to the base, the entire area was completely deserted, and I started walking down the boardwalk on the right towards the beach. As I'm walking down, I suddenly see someone approaching me from the beach, which was strange because I had a pretty clear view of the same area from the balcony just before and had literally seen no one. I start to get a bit nervous as I see this figure approach, and as I get closer, I see it as a man, maybe in his late 30s, who has a backpack on and is wearing glasses with large square lenses. As he gets closer, I get a clearer look at him as the boardwalk is sort of illuminated by lights from the outdoor bar. He looks very on edge and alert, almost like he's trying to find someone who's trying to meet him in this area, and his clothes are somewhat tattered. We made eye contact and I sort of nod at him and pass. At this point, I'm creeped out because, honest to God, he had a sort of Jeffrey Dahmer look. If it was the glasses, and he just didn't seem like he actually belonged to the timeshare. I shake it off and keep walking down the beach and put my headphones in. As I get down to the beach, I turn right and start walking parallel to the water, and I'm just taking in the scenery. I'm barefoot and decided to be nice to walk just along the shoreline, so I move closer to the water and continue walking. I'm walking for no longer than a minute before I get a really strange feeling that something is wrong. I take off my headphones and turn around, and I see a dark figure that is trailing me just upshore. He is situated in between me and the timeshare. I immediately can tell from the figure's height, body type, and demeanor that it is the same man I passed on the boardwalk. At this point, I'm starting to panic, as every story from Let's Read is rushing to my head. At the same time, I'm trying to rationalize, as it feels too surreal that I may actually be in a dangerous situation. So I remind myself it could just be a coincidence, and the man decided he also wanted to take a walk on the beach, and just happened to be headed in the same direction as me. So I take some breaths and turn my head back to the ocean and continue walking in the same direction. After a couple of seconds, I turn my head back again, and seeing that now, he is much closer to me, and is not walking parallel to me, but is definitely actually walking towards me. I picked up my walking speed now and turned my head back around and see he's matching my faster pace and is still walking towards me and the water. Still, for some reason, I think, okay, maybe he also wants to walk by the water. There's no way I'm actually being followed by a creepy man on a deserted beach. So at this point, to truly test it, I do a 180 and completely change directions. And as I turn my head, I see him completely change directions with me and continue closing in distance, and he's power walking now. It suddenly hits me that I'm in a really bad situation, and I take off in a run along the water, and he starts running as well. He stays up shore of me so that if I try to run up towards the boardwalk, he will intercept me. I'm freaking out now and just keep running with no plan, but figured that since I'm 20 and sort of fit, I should probably be able to keep running along the water and outrun him, and then find some other exit off the beach and either call my family or head back to the timeshare on the road. So I keep running, but he's keeping up with me, and this goes on for what feels like 10 to 15 minutes. The scariest part of all of this, which I wouldn't have thought of, is it is completely dead silent. All I hear is my breath and feet on the sand, and when I turn, I only see his shadowy figure upshore keeping pace with me. Suddenly up ahead, in the sand, I see a small blue light and what looks like 4 people on the beach with a blanket. They are a bit upshore. I turn and look at the figure and bet even though they are upshore, I can beat him to these people, so I start sprinting towards them with the hopes of quickly telling them what's going on so we all can confront him. I really use up my energy sprinting towards them, and as I approach, my heart drops. What I see is 4 guys on a blanket, with 3 or 4 handles of hard liquor surrounding them. 3 of the handles are empty, and the 4th is about half empty. 3 of the guys are just completely passed out in the blankets, and the last is half sat up, obviously beyond drunk, with a sort of party hat on that has blue lights on it, and he's talking to himself. His eyes are half closed, and he doesn't even register me approaching him, even though now I'm no more than 5 feet away. I turn and see the figure has slowed down and is observing me, and then I see he makes sense of the group's state and suddenly starts sprinting at me. As he gets closer, the half-passed out guy's blue light illuminates him, and I can clearly see it's the same guy as before. I make eye contact with him, and I can see he's wide-eyed and looks almost manic and is barreling at me full sprint. At this point, I decided to do something decisive. It seemed like I had underestimated his fitness, and since I had just sprinted towards this group and exhausted myself, I was afraid that he might be able to catch up to me if we just continued running along the beach indefinitely, and then who knows what. So instead of turning around and running, I suddenly sprint towards him and to the right, which I don't think he was expecting at all. I catch him off balance and run past him, and I literally am full sprinting back to the timeshare without even looking back. Literally all the hairs on my neck were standing, and it felt like a dream where you're barely evading someone, but he's right about to catch you. The adrenaline was crazy, and I keep running and start to see the timeshare. I finally turn around to see how close he is, and I see him in the distance, maybe 400 to 500 feet away. He's lost a lot of distance on me. I don't waste any time and sprint up the boardwalk and towards the base of the timeshare. I jam the elevator buttons and leap in, and start mashing the closed door button as I'm gasping for air. The door closes and I hit the button for my floor, and when the elevator reaches, I literally sprint back to my room, open the door, enter, and then slam the door and double lock it. I'm breathing heavy and I drop to the floor and just sit there for a minute, not believing what just happened. I crouch and crawl over to my room as I was literally afraid he might be able to see through the window on our balcony, and I enter my room. Let's just say I definitely wasn't able to sleep after that. I was born and raised in South Carolina. It was always tough living there because I'm an African-American lady. My family and I grew up in an upper-middle-class neighborhood. Both my parents are immigrants who worked hard to give my siblings and I a good life. So it was a Saturday evening when my parents went out on a date. I was 14 at the time, and they trusted I would be able to babysit my little brother and sister. I'd done this a million times before, so I wasn't worried. They left the house at around 8 and promised to be back no later than 11 p.m. Everything seemed perfectly fine at first. My brother was in the first living room playing on his Xbox. I was on the couch near him using my phone, and my sister was upstairs in our room messing with her tablet. Now the layout of the house was something like this. You open the front door and immediately to your right you have the first living room. That leads into a dining room which leads into the kitchen. The kitchen is open and leads into the second living room. From there you can access the backyard and door to the garage. On the left of the front door you can go up the stairs to the bedrooms. On one side of the hall you have my sister and I's room and a bathroom, and on the other you have the master bedroom and my brother's room. I'm sitting on the couch with my brother. I then hear the garage door being opened. It was only around 9 p.m. and I knew my parents would never come back home this early. So I got up to meet them at the door and see why. Whenever they leave, I always make sure the door from the garage is locked, so I usually have to let them in. I walk up to the door, and just as I was about to open it, I stopped. I felt kind of anxious for whatever reason and didn't want to open up the door until I heard it was them. I see the doorknob wiggle violently, and I got scared and stepped back. I called out, "Mom?" No response. "Dad, is that you? Stop messing around." Nothing. I started to get really scared. "Dad, if this is you, please say something. I'm getting scared." After I said this, the wiggling got way more violent. It looked like the door was going to burst at any moment. By this point, my brother stopped playing his game and ran into the kitchen. Fearing for our lives, I ran into the kitchen, grabbed one of the biggest knives we had, took my brother's hand and ran upstairs. There I grabbed my sister and ran into my brother's room. By now I heard the door burst open. I locked the door and hid my siblings in the closet while I pushed the dresser in front of the door to barricade it. After I did that, I sat on his bed and called the cops. The operator got all of my details and said the cops would be there in 5 minutes. As I sat on the bed, I felt absolutely terrified. My mind was completely blank until I heard running up the stairs. The light sobbing in the closet from my siblings turned into fearful screams, and I had my back against the wall shaking as I held the knife in front of me. I heard them bust through each door. Eventually, they got to the end of the hall where my brother's room is and tried to open the door. They got angry and started banging and yelling at us to open up. I could tell by the voice that it was a man. Eventually, he's able to bust the lock and slide the door open. We lock eyes as he tries to get past my little makeshift barricade. I get a good look at his face and his features. He couldn't have been more than 5'10" and had a stocky build and a very deep voice. He had, at least to me, very obviously gotten cosmetic surgery. His face looked incredibly artificial. His skin had this unnatural smoothness to it. He had these glossy big lips, and his eyes seemed to be just a little too big. And I was on the verge of tears when I just yelled, "Don't come any closer! The police are on their way!" That seemed to stop him in his tracks. He took one last look at me when he ran down the stairs and out the front door. I ran to the closet to check on my siblings and see if they were all right. They were pretty shaken up, but other than that, they were okay. I heard the police finally pull up to my house about a minute later. An officer came in and yelled to see if we were all right. I remember being taken to the station with my siblings and calling my parents on the way too. We filed a report, but nothing came of it. I remember being so angry about it. There couldn't be that many people who looked like that in South Carolina. How was it so hard to find someone who left the crime scene within minutes before them arriving? This happened 24 years ago in July of 1996. I had finished my term of service for the Army. I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, and decided at midnight I would out-process and travel back to Wisconsin. All day I was so anxious to go that I had trouble sleeping. Finally, at 23:45, I got out of bed and went to sign out with the desk sergeant. Of course, knowing people wanted to sign out at midnight, he decided to do his rounds. You can't leave until you get your final sign-off with the sergeant and turn in your room key. So I waited, and finally, at 02:45, he returned. I turned my key in, got the sign-off, and at 03:30, I was on my way. At first, I was so full of adrenaline that I felt that I could drive for days. Unfortunately, that adrenaline didn't last long, and by the time I was getting through Dallas, I was nodding off. I decided just past Denton that I would pull over at the next rest stop and take a quick nap until the sun came up. I could barely keep my eyes open when I came up to a stop. I pulled over and got out of my car to get some air and throw something away and to get a look at my surroundings. There were only about 3 other cars and 2 semi-trucks there. It was a picnic stop and not a rest stop, so no restrooms. I threw my trash away and glanced at a poster of a few missing persons, but I really didn't pay any attention to it. I went back to my car, which was a basic Geo Metro. No radio, no power windows, no power locks. I cracked the windows and turned on the boombox I had for some tunes and laid down to get some sleep. I was only asleep maybe 5 or 10 minutes when I felt my car shake just slightly. I cracked an eye open and looked and didn't see anything, so I blew it off and went back to sleep. I then heard what sounded like my door handle being pulled and scratched on the door key. I then sat up quickly, but I didn't see anyone there. I looked at all the windows and didn't see anyone, so again I shrugged it off as me being tired and laid back down and turned up the radio. Being a Texas night in July, it was hot, but I was so tired I just laid back down. A few more minutes later, I heard the door handle again and car really shook. I sat up quickly and saw a man standing at the passenger's side looking in. Even though it was hot and humid, he was wearing a red sweatshirt with the hood up and I couldn't see his face. Being young and dumb and just out of the military, I yelled at him asking, "What the F do you want?" He just stared at me like an idiot and I got out of the car. Mind you, I'm only 5'6", but I was livid. He just walked off towards the picnic tables like nothing happened. All the while, I'm yelling at him that if he came back, I'd take him out. I decided I would just drive on from there. I got back in and went on my way. Even though I was so upset, only about 10 miles down the road, I was super tired again. Luckily, about another 10 miles down I-35, there was another picnic stop. Not sure why North Texas doesn't have rest areas, but they don't. I pulled into the second picnic stop and backed into a spot just in case I needed to leave quickly. Not sure why, but there was only one other car there and no semi-trucks. I again locked the doors, cracked the windows, and turned on my boombox. I fell asleep right away, and about 30 minutes later I hear a loud thud on my driver's side window. I jumped up and looked around, and no one was there. I got out of the car, which was very stupid, but I had my macho military attitude going. But no one was around. I assumed it was my nerves from the other stop. I got back into my car, locked the doors again, and closed my eyes. This time I was too amped up to fall asleep, so I laid there with my eyes closed. I felt that someone was looking at me, and I opened my eyes and saw the guy standing there again with the red sweatshirt, hood up. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could see he was smiling at me. I popped up quick and tried to quickly open the door and bump him. Being a cheap geo, since the doors were locked, it didn't open. He walked backwards, still staring at me. By the time I got out, he was about 30 feet away, facing me. It was fairly dark, but as I looked him over, he looked really skinny but was about 6'2", maybe 6'3", but I still felt like I could take him with my military experience. He was wearing the red hooded sweatshirt, blue jeans, and green tennis shoes. For some reason, I thought the shoes looked odd. I could see something shine every now and then as he stood there staring at me, and I honestly believe it was a machete. I quickly reached into my back seat and grabbed my baseball bat and started yelling at him to come get some. I'm not really sure why I said that. He started walking towards me and I took a few steps towards him, not really thinking. As I got about 5 feet away from my car and he was now about 15 feet from me, a yellow van pulled up quick and parked just off to the side of the road. I finally realized what was happening and I saw 2 guys also wearing hooded sweatshirts in the van. Before they could get out, I ran back to my car. I had left the keys in the ignition. Since I had backed in, I was able to cut it hard right and peeled my car out of there. I was so lucky. Being a manual car, I didn't stall the car because the other 2 guys were out of the van and the first guy was just about at my car. I jumped back on the interstate and didn't stop until I was about 20 miles into Oklahoma. I stopped for gas and to use the restroom. In the restroom, I noticed that same flyer I barely glanced at the first picnic stop. It was basically a flyer with several missing persons on it and warning people not to stop for long periods of time at the rest areas. It described a possible suspect as possibly 6 foot wearing blue jeans, green shoes, and a red hooded sweatshirt. I completely went white. Needless to say, since it was daylight, I drove the rest of the way to Wisconsin wide awake. Not sure why, but I never reported it to the number on the flyer or told anyone about it. But now I live in North Texas and pass those 2 picnic stops every day on my way to work, and I think about it quite often.